All right. So just to recap last week really quickly, if you were not here, I'm doing a series of lessons on what I hope is practical applications of hospitality. I'm sharing with you some of what I learned while I studied for the ladies retreat, and we're trying to build on that and look at ways we can apply it to our daily lives. And so last week I introduced this idea of the 6 gifts of hospitality that the author of the book that I'm kind of following, if you guys didn't see it, it's called The 6 Gifts of Hospitality, broke down hospitality into. She took the verses from Matthew 25, and I know I said it last week, but just to clarify, we're talking about gifts we can give others, not talents. The Bible does not list hospitality as a talent. We're all commanded to give hospitality. And we also talked real briefly about some of the benefits of giving hospitality. And so just as a reminder, here are the 6 gifts we looked at last week. Nourishment. This is the breakdown of Matthew 25, those verses we read. For I was hungry and you gave me food. Service, I was thirsty and you gave me drink. Shelter, I was a stranger and you welcomed me. Benevolence, I was naked and you clothed me. Comfort, I was sick and you visited me. Companionship, I was in prison and you came to me. So, nor am I saying this is all that we can give, just that those are the ones that we are exampled in Matthew 25. And so we ended last week with this great discussion. I was like panicking while I was teaching. My class is going to end early, but I was so glad it did. Your discussion was great. I loved the comments. I loved discussion in class. It was fantastic. And I challenged you to think of these 3 questions at the end of class. And I wanted to take a couple minutes, and I wanted to know I really wanted to hear your thoughts on the second question. Which of these acts of hospitality is out of your comfort zone?
The third one.
The third one?
Yeah.
Shelter?
Yeah, I live right across the street from the Reichels, and they lovingly refer to their house as the Reichel B&B, because that's constantly this revolving door of people from around the state visiting them, and I'm thinking, I have a spare room. Oh my goodness, I can offer that to anybody, so that's the one that scares me.
I think shelter, and I think a lot of it is just because it's so, you can make so many excuses for that, like my house isn't decorated enough, or I'm not unpacked enough, or it's not clean enough because I have a tornado for a child. And I think, because I'm looking at this list, and I'm not thinking of many of them out of my comfort zone, I'm just thinking of the ones that I make the most excuses for, and that would definitely be shelter.
Yes.
For me, I think it is companionship, because I have issues when I first meet people, talking to them, so going to somebody that I don't know and offering them that. And a lot of people who know me wouldn't think that about me, because once I get used to you nonstop, so that would be like an edge I have to get over.
Yeah. Yeah.
For me, it's comfort. And anytime any of my kids were sick, I'm like, come on, you're not really sick. It's not that bad. Something like that. And, or Rick or whatever. I just really have a hard time with that one. Just showing comfort. That's why I was not meant to be a nurse.
On that same note, I can do it to a stranger. I'm a nurse, so comforting or taking care of someone that I'll see for 12 hours, maybe 2 or 3 days, a month at a time, and then you don't see them again. Like sometimes that's easier, and I complain and whine about Richard being sick. I hated that being the nurse at home, and everyone calls you for. It's easier for me there to take care of someone else if it's my own family.
Yes.
I think mine's companionship. Years ago, I used to have, I struggle anymore with deeper relationships, and I'm putting myself out here. Tim used to be this person that struggled, and it's like we've switched roles. Most people see me as very outgoing, but I would rather be sitting at home for myself sometimes than opening myself up for fear of getting hurt. And I just don't a lot of times. And sometimes my relationships don't go very deep.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So I thought about this a lot this week. I mean, I challenged you guys, and I said, okay, this is a challenge for me too. And I really thought about it. And I would start down this path and of, that one is hard because nourishment's hard because I don't feel like I'm a good cook. And service is challenging because I'm not really sure where to help. It kind of became this list of excuses, kind of like you said. And shelter is challenging because my house just does not feel like enough. And benevolence, maybe that's my weakest one because I don't feel like I have a lot to give. And you guys see where I'm going, right? Comfort, that's weak for me because I feel like I often stumble over my words, especially in one-on-one. I struggle with that initial connection and companionship, same thing. And I have 2 kids, and I'm not good at small talk. And I quickly convinced myself that every single one of these was my weak point. Are some of these statements I made about myself true? Yeah. Are some of them feelings and really have absolutely no bearing on whether I offer them? Yes. But it made me think about how often we psych ourselves out, or maybe I should say Satan uses our thoughts to psych us out from doing anything. So we feel paralyzed and we do nothing. And being a parent is very humbling. Teaching is very humbling to you all. And most of you guys know I have a 4-year-old daughter, and she's our oldest, and so we are pretty new to the parenting game. So you guys, can poke fun at my parenting strategies here, and you're not going to hurt my feelings. And we're at that age where a lot of boundaries get tested. And I assume that's all ages, by the way, just different boundaries get tested. And I'm not saying we do anything right, but one of the rules that we have for Jaina is you start by obeying, and then you can ask questions. But you start by obeying. You start with obedience. So if we tell her to go to bed, and she's in the middle of something, we want her to start by saying, yes, Mama, or yes, Papa, and move that direction. Go start towards the bathroom, go get your pajamas, and then come back and ask questions. And then you can ask if you can finish what you're doing. But you start with the step of obedience. Does she feel like obeying? Psh, no. But do I feel like obeying? And parenting is one of those places you really see yourself most clearly. And when God puts something in my path or sends me down a direction, do I start down that road of obedience? Do I step out in obedience in faith and then go, okay, God, I'm not sure what I'm doing. Please help me figure out. But do I take that step of obedience first? And this just really hit home to me this week as I thought about this list, and I thought about how I can see them all as weak points in my life. And can I obey and offer hospitality and let Him help me figure out the details? Can I obey and open my home regardless of my own personal insecurities? And we remember hospitality. Remember, God is much more interested in that we love and serve than what our home looks like. Hospitality is not fluff. This is serious. The Bible commands this of us, all of us. So, in challenging you all to think about this, I really challenged myself. And with all that in mind, we're going to start this week with looking at the gift of nourishment. And I was so excited by James' sermon this morning lesson because it tied into some of what we're going to talk about, and it really just got me excited. And nourishment is probably the type of hospitality that most often comes to mind when you think about it, feeding somebody. For I was hungry and you gave me food. And food plays a role in many major events in the Bible. Our lives depend on physical nourishment, and the necessity of food really can't be ignored for very many hours before your body starts to complain about it. Hunger can make us antsy. It can make people angry. It can make it hard to concentrate. And this quote that I ran into this week really struck me as I forgot to write my click in my notes, and now I have the wrong slide. Really struck me this week as I looked at the gift of nourishment. A hungry stomach cannot hear. When you have something kind of poking at you, like hunger or pain, or sometimes you kind of exist in this fog behind it that you can't, things don't absorb through it, for lack of a better word. So if you're hungry, how can you hear the words of love? How can you hear about Christ? How can you absorb it if there's something, poking at you like that? And this week we're going to look at some examples in Scripture of people who fed other people and kind of what we can take away from that. So essentially applications of people giving this gift of nourishment. And, we're going to start with Abraham, and we're going to look at the different gifts of hospitality he extends, because they're really often intertwined. There's really not, if you're opening up your home for a meal, you're also kind of opening it for shelter. There's a lot of give and take in all of these. But we're going to start in Genesis, and we're going to read chapter 18, verses 1 through 8. So, and the Lord appeared to him by the oaks of Mamre, as he sat at the door of his tent in the heat of the day. And he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, 3 men were standing in front of him. And when he saw them, he ran from the tent door to meet them, and he bowed himself to the earth. Notice, this is not grudgingly given. He's very excited to do this. And he said, "O Lord, if you have found favor in your sight, do not pass by your servant. Let a little water be brought, and wash your feet," like the gift of service, "and rest," a gift of comfort, "yourselves under this tree," gift of shelter. "I will bring a morsel of bread," and there we have nourishment, "that you may refresh yourselves, and after that you may pass on, since you have come to your servant." So they said, "Do as you have said." And Abraham went quickly into the tent to Sarah and said, "Quick, quick, bring the fine flour, knead it, make cakes." And Abraham ran to the herd and took a calf, tender and good, and he gave it to a young man who prepared it quickly. And then he took curds and milk and the calf that he had prepared, and he set it before them. And he stood by them under the tree while they ate. A gift of companionship. Webster defines servant as one who exerts himself for the benefit of others. And Abraham really exemplifies that here, right? We are called to be servants. We are called to offer this gift of nourishment as a servant. And they offered it with a great attitude, right? I mean, he ran to them, and then he ran to his wife and said, "We're doing this. Let's do this. Let's cook for them. Let's get this. This is the servant heart that we have exampled to us, that we should be offering to the people around us. Some have entertained angels unaware, right? So we're supposed to feed others with a servant attitude. And our attitude matters. Wasn't Martha rebuked for her attitude while serving? I mean, she was, a lot of us can identify with that, right? She was running around doing everything, trying to get the house ready, but her attitude was wrong, and Christ rebuked her for it. So now we're going to turn over to Nehemiah, and we often remember this story, and he's rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem, but we don't often remember that he had the task of daily feeding all the workers, all of them. So Nehemiah chapter 5, we're going to read verses 16 through 18. "I also persevered in the work on this wall, and we acquired no land, and all my servants were gathered there for the work. Moreover, there were at my table 150 men, Jews and officials, besides those who had come to us from the nations that were around us. Now what was prepared at my expense for each day was 1 ox and 6 choice sheep and birds, and every 10 days all kinds of wine in abundance. Yet for all of this I did not demand the food allowance of the governor, because the service was too heavy on this people." He fed the workers, 150 plus, out of his own pocket, daily. That's a little daunting to me to think about. I'm like, wow, I'm doing good to get dinner for, my family of 4 on the table daily. He fed them daily. So if you are looking for ideas to offer the gift of nourishment, we start with our attitude. Do we have a servant attitude? Are we looking around us? Are we running towards opportunities? And if you're looking for where to start, feed the workers. Or someone who may or may not be feeling burdened. He says, I'm not going to make the people pay for this because they're too burdened already. Feed the preachers, feed the elders, feed the deacons, feed the missionaries, feed the young families whose budget is tight. If you're looking for a place to start, feed the workers. Feed the workers that God has put you in contact with. And then we run into those times where we just feel like we can't offer anything. And I would imagine most people have been there in their life, if you're not there right now. You feel like your cupboard's bare, you feel like you have nothing to offer, your budget is really tight, you have an empty cupboard. And sometimes we give from an empty cupboard. So we're going to look in Kings, and this is speaking of Elijah. It's 1 Kings chapter 17, verses 8, and I'll go down through 16. Then the word of the Lord came to him. Arise, go to Zarephath, which belongs to Sidon, and dwell there. Behold, I have commanded a widow there to feed you. So he arose, and he went to Zarephath, and when he came to the gate of the city, behold, a widow was there gathering sticks. And he called to her and said, Bring me a little water in a vessel that I may drink. And as she was going to bring it, he called to her and said, Bring me a morsel of bread in your hand. And she said, As the Lord your God lives, I have nothing baked, and only a handful of flour in a jar, and a little oil in a jug. And now I am gathering a couple of sticks that I may go in and prepare it for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die. And Elijah said to her, Do not fear. Go and do as you have said, but first make me a little cake of it and bring it to me. And afterward make something for yourself and your son. For thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, the jar of flour shall not be spent, and the jug of oil shall not be empty, until the day that the Lord sends rain upon the earth. And she went and did as Elijah said. And she and he and her household ate for many days. The jar of flour was not spent, and neither did the jug of oil become empty, according to the word of the Lord that he spoke by Elijah. Okay, somebody comes to you and you only have enough food for one more meal for your son. You're in the middle of a famine and says, use the last of your food and feed me. What are the odds you're going to say, okay, I got it. All right, I'll do it. But God told her to. And she stepped out in that obedience we're talking about. And she trusted him to fill the need. She fed from her empty cupboard. She fed the person that God put in front of her. Sometimes we just have to serve who God puts in front of us with what we have when we can. Our resources are going to look different. And it's going to look different at different times in our lives. And meals don't have to be fancy. How often do you put that pressure on yourself? Okay, I gotta have steak to serve, or I can't have people over, or fill in the blank. We all have something that excuse that holds us back. Our gift of nourishment can be that box of macaroni we give to the food pantry. God makes our little enough. God can make our little enough. So sometimes we have to give the gift of nourishment from our empty cupboard. And that's challenging. There's no easy way around that. I mean, that's a challenging example. And sometimes the breaking of bread in a tense situation can have a calming effect. And this just got me so excited because, like I said, I was so excited by what James taught about this morning. And we're giving several examples of this in Scripture, not just one. Him talking about being the peacemaker. We're going to look in 1 Samuel. And let's see, I don't have the chapter written down. Chapter 25, and I'm going to read 32 through 35. And just to set the situation, David is heading towards Abigail's husband, Nabal, with 400 sword-wielding men. 400. That's a lot. They were coming to confront her husband, and in response, this is what David tells her. And David said, she meets him. I forgot to fill in that part. See, my mouth is getting ahead of my head, or vice versa. She meets them with food. She goes to the battlefield. She meets this man and his army with food. And David said to Abigail, Blessed be the Lord, the God of Israel, who sent you this day to meet me. Blessed be your discretion, and blessed be you, who have kept me this day from blood guilt, and from working salvation with my own hand. For as surely as the Lord, the God of Israel, lives, who has restrained me from hurting you, unless you had hurried and come to meet me. Truly, by morning there had not been left to Nabal so much as one male. And then David received from her hand what she had brought him, and he said to her, Go up in peace to your home. See, I have obeyed your voice, and I have granted your petition. There is power in offering our servant nourishment to our enemies. Now, later in the chapter, Nabal's dead, and Abigail ends up married to David. She met an army. An army. Can you imagine? I mean, and we're not even talking like a uniformed army. I assume that would be intimidating. But weren't David's men known as mighty men? She met an army on the battlefield and fed them. She was like the ultimate peacemaker. Feed to make peace. Feed your enemies. God does not always ask us to do the easy. Feeding from our empty cupboards is hard. Feeding our enemies to make peace would be tough. These are not easy things God asks of us, but he asks us to step out in obedience. And then in 2 Kings, Elisha feeds his enemies. So we're going to read 2 Kings chapter 6, verses 21 through 23. As soon as the king of Israel saw them, he said to Elisha, "My father, shall I strike them down? Shall I strike them down?" And he answered, "You shall not strike them down. Would you strike down those whom you have taken captive with your sword and your bow? Set bread and water before them, that they may eat and drink and go to their master." So he prepared for them a great feast. And when they had eaten and drunk, he sent them away. And they went to their master. And the Syrians did not come again on raids into the land of Israel. Talk about peace. He fed his captives. They fed their enemies. They fed for peace. And often we can feed others to uplift and encourage, which is another exciting example we get in Scripture of a way to offer nourishment. So we're going to turn over to Acts 27 and read verses 30 through 38. And just to kind of set the stage, we're talking about Paul in this example, and he is a prisoner. I mean, he's not a free man. He is a prisoner on the ship, and it has been battling a storm for 2 weeks. 2 weeks. I don't know how many of you have been in like a Texas windstorm or you know, I can imagine experiencing that on the sea and then being stuck in it for more than 2 weeks. And as day was about to dawn, Paul urged them all to take some food, saying, "Today is the 14th day that you have continued in suspense and without food, having taken nothing. Therefore, I urge you to take some food, for it will give you strength. For not a hair is to perish from the head of any of you." And when he had said these things, he took bread, and giving thanks to God in the presence of all, he broke it, and he began to eat. Then they all were encouraged and ate some food themselves. And we were in all 276 persons in the ship. And when they had eaten enough, they lightened the ship, throwing it out the wheat into the sea. So if we're looking for people to feed, if we are looking for who God has put in front of us, look for those who are caught in life's storms. And there are a lot of storms in life. You know, there is heartache, there is loss, there is loneliness. There are a lot of storms. So if you're looking for a place to start, find someone who's in one of life's storms and feed them. Feed them. Nourishment is not just about food. When we offer the gift of nourishment, we're not only feeding the body, but it also uplifts our spirits. Think about how many celebrations involve food. I did not plan this lesson that it was Thanksgiving. It just worked out that way. Think about how much we just celebrated with food this week. And we'll continue to do so. Thank you. I mean, I still have memories of meals at my grandparents', and I have a lot of family. I probably would feed 30 to 50 people. And, you know, eating together nourishes those relationships. I remember, you know, my aunts singing, doing the dishes after the meal, and these things build over time into relationships. They build those relationships. When you eat together, you nourish your relationship. When you sit around a table together, you have the best eye contact, you have the most interaction, and you have memories are made. In Acts 2, we're shown the example of the early church, and day by day, they attended the temple together, and breaking bread in their homes, they received their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having favor with all the people. And the Lord added to their number day by day those who were being saved. Eating together nourishes the spirit. It nourishes the spirit. It's about more than food. Think about how often bread is used as an example for things in the Bible, or bread is used in lots of ways in the Bible. The Israelites were given bread in the wilderness. Bread was in the holy place of the tabernacle to show God's providence. Bread was used in dreams. Bread was used in the tempting of Christ. And bread is used to represent Christ. Nourishment is important, and it's not just about food. In our country and around the world, people have built memorials to honor distinguished persons. I've been privileged or blessed enough to see some of the ones in like DC, and they are awesome. You stand in them and you are just felt like overwhelmed in awe of these, the Lincoln Memorial and the Washington Memorial, these elaborate buildings, these tombs, the pyramids, I can only imagine. And they are impressive. Think about them. If you've ever been to any of them, picture how impressed you were. And then think about, in contrast, the action Christ used to serve as a remembrance of himself. He chose a simple act of hospitality. And he took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it, and he gave it to them, saying, "This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." And Jesus said to them, "I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me shall not hunger, and whoever believes in me shall never thirst." The simple act of breaking bread together serves as a bond, an agreement between us. There are so many examples of Christ as the bread of life and how he used it in his ministry. Bread and nourishment is our daily reminder of God's providence and his hospitality towards us. And it's our weekly reminder of the sacrifice he made for us. So I really urge you to look for ways to serve with the gift of nourishment. Because it's about so much more than food. It's about so much more than food. And if you're looking for where to start, go to the Word. Go to the Word. Look at the examples of people feeding people and see what you can learn from those. Feed others with that servant heart like Sarah and Abraham. Feed the workers around you. And there are a lot of workers. We are blessed in that we have a lot of workers. Remember, with God, your little is enough to gift someone nourishment. Feed those you need peace with. Feed your enemies. Remember, we talked, hospitality is not the easy stuff. We're not talking about the easy stuff. Feed that person at church maybe you feel tension with sometimes. Develop, nourish that relationship. Feed someone lost in life's storm, right? Feed someone you see sitting alone, Go up, ask them to go have a coffee sometime. Feed someone to grow your relationship. Take someone you know casually, lightly. Go grab a meal with them. Deepen that relationship. Nourish that relationship by offering the gift of nourishment to that person. Feed someone to be like Jesus. How many times did he feed people? Physically and spiritually. To show Jesus. Feed someone to show Jesus. To show people the bread of life. So here's your challenge for the week, and I'm glad we finished a few minutes early because I really want to brainstorm with you guys. I challenge you guys this week to find a way to feed someone. And that's going to look different for all of us. For some, it's going to look like planning to have someone over in a few weeks. For some, it might be grabbing a cup of coffee or tea with someone you maybe casually know or don't. For some, it might be meeting another person out for dinner. Or maybe it's bringing something in for the food pantry. I meant to get the list so I would have the list to offer you of what's needed in the food pantry, Or maybe it's buying a meal at McDonald's and offering it to that person on the corner. And in offering the physical nourishment, we might get the opportunity to offer the real nourishment, the bread of life nourishment. The gift of nourishment is powerful when we offer it to people. For a hungry stomach cannot hear. So this challenge, I realize lives are busy. So here's my challenge. Take a step in one of these directions this week. Like I said, that's going to look different for everybody. If it's you feel like you could bring something in for the food pantry, my challenge is go look at the list. Add an item to your groceries list. Bring it in a week or so. If you feel like you're ready to try to open your home to somebody, my challenge is go find somebody in this week and say, okay, let's set a date. I'd like to have you over for dinner. You know, make a step that week. Step out in obedience and let God help you work out the details. So that's my challenge. But I would love to hear ideas from you guys. What are different ways we can offer nourishment that maybe aren't as obvious? I liked the food pantry one. That one really, I thought, we don't always think of that. But that's offering a valuable gift of nourishment. We're offering hospitality by supplying that. So I would love to hear ideas.
I would like to, the food pantry list, you know how it's in the bulletin or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
If whoever's in charge of it is to have it in like a 3x5 size paper, so it's there, and just take it with us. And I have it in my purse because I always like, oh, what is in the list? I can't remember what's in the list. But I tend to, if you have it, just take with you, and it's small.
Yeah.
It's there, and you at the store put it in your wallet and grab some of it.
That is a great idea. I love it. I wrote it down, so I will try to help connect that.
With Ladies Ministry,
Mm-hmm.
Tanika is in charge of meals that get delivered to people who need meals.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just actually talking to Tanika earlier today, and she says, I love doing it, but sometimes I don't see all the need out there. So even if you see a need and you think someone might need a meal, you could contact Tanika and she could help get it delivered there. Even if you don't make it, that has some freezer. So
help connect resources.
Yeah.
That's a way you can be involved. If you're gonna offer, if you think maybe you could grab McDonald's meals and offer them to people on the corner. Grab some business cards from the church. Hand them a business card for the church with the meal. Say, hey, you're welcome anytime. Yes, Beth.
I have this thing, and it seems like when I first started, every time you stop somewhere, like a light or a stop sign, there's always somebody looking for something.
Mm-hmm.
So all I had was, I just happened to go to McDonald's and had a milkshake. It's like, well, here, you can have it. I haven't drank it yet. So that was happening more often. So I decided one day, you guys go to the dentist every 6 months. I know we do. And we always get the goodie bags. And it has, the little...
The floss, the
things.
toothbrush, exactly.
I have been collecting them in this Rubbermaid things. And one day I opened it, I was like, I have so much and we don't use it. Because we use an electric toothbrush or whatever. So I took all of them and took those brown lunchbox bag. And so I put those things in it, and then I put, you can buy those boxes of, it has snack size cookies or crackers or whatever. I put that inside in each brown bag. And then I decided to put a water bottle. I always have water bottle in my car. So I had this bag in between the seat and the back. So instead of I don't have anything right here to give you, so I just take this brown bag, and we have business cards in here.
Yeah, we do.
A bunch of those. And I put them in the brown bag. If you go in my car, there's a bag right in between every time. Take one of those brown bags. It has a business card in it. It has water bottle. Water bottle is great. And I never give away money. So
right.
You have toothbrush in there and toothpaste and floss.
That's a great idea. Sometimes being able to offer to who God puts in front of you is being a little bit prepared. Yes.
We used to do the same thing in Anchorage before they started finding people, the panhandlers, giving to the panhandlers. But we would do a baggie, and we would go to Costco, and we would buy in bulk the cans that popped open, and we would always put a fork or a spoon in there. We would do the same thing with fruit or some kind of snack bar, either a juice or a water bottle, and then a card from the church. And that way, if they weren't comfortable talking to you about it when you're handing them out or you're just passing by, we always kept them in the car. and it was real easy to hand out, but then that connection was there with that card.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic idea. So if you think that might be something you do, grab some cards. If you need more, talk to Nancy. I'm sure she'd be happy to get you some more business cards for the church.
When my kids were little, I didn't always socialize as much, but a sister of ours invited me to lunch for my birthday. And so just keep your eyes out for things like that come along. And then she moved away, so I started having lunch with a different sister. And it wasn't always on my birthday or her birthday, you know, and so it just starts to build relationships. But it all started with her inviting me for a lunch date
Right.
for my birthday.
Step out. Step out. It's hard. I am an introvert by nature. It is not easy. But I encourage you to step out. The rewards, even if you don't see them, are everlasting. Yes.
What I used to do is when I saw the construction workers on a really hot day, I would get a big thing of water, and I would give it to them and say, "Here you go, this is for you." And then you guys work hard, and I really appreciate that. And so I get into like, if I see how many I have,
Right.
and I had Paul and somebody else was with me, and I said, "Here," because usually they get mad at, and I say, usually they get upset with construction workers about doing too long, and so I figured, I tell them, "Thank you for everything you do."
Right. That's a
So,
great
and
idea.
sometimes when I see the firefighters, or if they're out getting coffee or something, I would buy them coffee, just to tell them, "Hey, thank you for your service, thank you." So I try to find different ways, but that's the way I see it, because if I don't, I try to make sure I do that for others.
Yeah,
Others will do
you're
it.
offering the gift of your hospitality of nourishment to people, and that's powerful. And we don't see the effects, and we don't know if the peace will be made or if it will come back at us, like James talked about this morning. But our example is there. Our example is there. Yes.
When Mark was going through chemo and we were at his son oncology, there was a Girl Scout troop that left care packages for the patients, and there were, it was just really touching. And there were protein bars in there, you know, and all different kind of things for patients.
That's
That's
awesome.
something too.
Yeah. Feed people in life storms. Yeah.
It can be very simple, really. The day after Thanksgiving, I stole Anne's recipe with her cranberries that are drizzled with the white chocolate that I just love. And I thought, my neighbors have got to love this too. So I had called her and said, "I'm going to bring this over." And then she said, "Well, our little boy's just getting ready to take his nap." And I had Junior with me. I said, "Oh, we don't need to stay long, but Junior does want to come with me. So could we come real quick?" So I took it on this yucky old black cookie sheet because I didn't have time to really transfer it, and it was still blue. So it did not look beautiful at all, and they were just thrilled. They love that recipe now.
That's funny.
And the little boy got to have a little exchange with Junior, and it was just all good. And it probably was like a 5-minute encounter.
That's really fantastic. So I challenge you guys this week, take a step that direction to feed someone. And if you're comfortable, I would love to hear about it next week. I would love to hear about the step you took that direction. And we're out of time. And don't forget to bring stuff for the kind of quiet pounding for Melissa Berg and leave it here on the table. So thank you, ladies, for your attention.